She banged on my door like it was the end of the world. Before I could even open it, she shouted loud enough for the whole street to hear. "This is the HOA, you're being evicted, get out now." I stepped out calmly, barefoot, coffee still in my hand, staring at the ridiculous piece of paper she had taped to my front door. It was some fake official notice with misspelled words and a giant HOA stamp she clearly printed from Google. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering. Then two men walked up behind her in cheap uniforms with shiny badges that looked like they came straight from a Halloween store. She grinned like she'd already won. "Officers, arrest him, he's trespassing on HOA property." The crowd gasped. A few people even pulled out their phones to record. One of the fake cops puffed his chest and said, "Sir, step aside, you no longer have the right to live here." I didn't move, I just looked straight into Karen's eyes, calm but sharp. "Funny thing," I set my coffee down on the railing and leaned forward slightly. "You're trespassing on my land." Karen laughed, waving her hands dramatically. "Your land, please, you don't own anything here, you don't belong in this community. These officers are here to handle you." She crossed her arms, certain I'd be dragged away in front of everyone. But instead of fear, I smiled slowly, deliberately. The neighbors noticed it and a ripple of confusion passed through them. Because she had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't just another homeowner. I was a U.S. Marshal. And the game had just begun. Karen's smug face twisted when I didn't budge. She snapped her fingers at the fake cops like she was commanding dogs. "Do your job, put him in cuffs." One of them stepped forward, reaching for a plastic-looking pair of handcuffs, his voice trying to sound tough. "Sir, don't resist." I tilted my head, almost amused. "Don't resist?" I repeated softly, then pulled something from my back pocket. The neighbors leaned forward, curious. It wasn't an ID from some local security firm, it was my badge. A real U.S. Marshal badge that gleamed under the porch light. The so-called officer froze mid-step, his partner's face drained of color. Karen blinked twice, her confidence cracking. What is this?" she stammered. "This," I said, holding it up for the crowd to see, "is the only real badge here tonight. You just tried to send fake cops to arrest a federal officer." Gasps shot through the street. Phones zoomed in, catching every detail. Karen's bravado wavered, but she forced a laugh, waving at the imposters. No, these are real officers, right? But the men were already sweating bullets. One of them muttered, "Ma'am, maybe we should." "Shut up," Karen snapped, glaring at them before turning back to me. "This doesn't mean anything, you don't belong here and the HOA can." I cut her off with a calm but cold voice. "HOA doesn't outrank federal law, and impersonating police, that's a federal crime." The silence that followed was heavy. The neighbors started murmuring, some outright laughing at her. One woman whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "She picked the wrong guy." Karen's lips trembled, but instead of backing down, she doubled down, eyes wild, voice rising. "I'll prove you don't own this house, you'll see, you're nothing but a squatter in my neighborhood." That's when I realized she wasn't just entitled, she was dangerous. And I wasn't about to let her win. Karen stormed down my porch like she owned it, snatching her phone out of her bag. She started recording me, shoving the camera in my face. "See this? This man is impersonating law enforcement. He's threatening me in my own neighborhood." The neighbors gasped again, but this time no one believed her. They'd just seen my badge. Still, she shouted louder, making sure her fake story carried down the street. "He's dangerous, he shouldn't be around families, somebody call the real police." I stayed calm, leaning against the railing. "Already did," I said, pulling out my radio. My voice echoed sharp through the street as I spoke directly into it. "Marshal 421 requesting backup, possible impersonators on site." The imposter cops panicked. One of them actually tried to run, but Karen grabbed his arm and shoved him back toward me. "Don't you dare leave, do your job," she barked. His face was pale. He whispered something to her, but I caught it. "We're going to jail if we stay here." Karen hissed, "Shut up and arrest him." The crowd wasn't on her side anymore. A man across the street yelled, "Lady, you're the one trespassing, he owns that land." Another neighbor held up their phone. "It's all on video, everything you just did." For the first time, Karen's confidence cracked wide open. Her eyes darted from camera to camera, then back at me. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. "You think you're clever? This isn't over. The HOA board will back me up. You'll lose this house, just wait." I didn't even move, I just pointed to the flashing red and blue lights that were now racing down the street. Real police. Karen spun around, panic flashing across her face. The fake cops looked like they wanted to melt into the ground. And that's when I whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Game over, Karen. Real police cars screeched to a stop, lights painting the houses in blue and red, doors slammed and two uniformed officers stepped out, hands resting on their holsters. The crowd went dead silent. Karen's face lit up again like she'd just been saved. She rushed toward them, pointing at me frantically. "Officers, thank God you're here, arrest him immediately, he's trespassing and pretending to be a marshal." The officers didn't move toward me, instead their eyes landed on the two men in cheap uniforms. One officer raised a brow. "Funny, I don't recognize you two, which department did you say you're with?" The fake cops froze, stammering. We private detail, ma'am," one blurted. "Private detail in police uniforms?" The officer shot back, stepping closer. "That's impersonation of law enforcement, federal offense." Karen's jaw dropped. No, they're with the HOA, they're here to help me enforce the rules." The crowd burst out laughing, phones catching every word. One guy shouted, "Karen, they're going to take you away." I finally stepped forward, calm as ever, holding up my badge for the officers. "Deputy U.S. Marshal, these men attempted to arrest me under her orders, all of it's been recorded." The officers nodded firmly. "Copy that, Marshal, we'll take it from here." Karen's confidence snapped like glass. "No, you don't understand, he doesn't belong here, this land is HOA property, I'm protecting the neighborhood." I looked her dead in the eye and said, slow and clear, "This land doesn't belong to the HOA, it belongs to me, and I've got the paperwork to prove it." Karen's scream echoed through the street, "Liar." But when the officer asked for documents, I pulled out the folder I'd kept ready for months, the deed, the title, everything with my name on it. The officer scanned it, nodded, then turned to her. "Ma'am, looks like you're the trespasser tonight." Karen's face went white. And for the first time, she had no words. Karen's breathing turned sharp and heavy, her hands shaking as the officers stepped closer. She tried to force a smile, but her voice cracked. This is a setup, he's tricking all of you, the HOA will clear this up." One of the neighbors shouted from across the street, "HOA doesn't own his land, Karen, stop lying." Another neighbor, an older veteran, added, "Lady, I've seen plenty of crooks in my day and you fit the bill." The crowd's anger was shifting, no one was with her anymore. The fake cops made one last desperate move. "We're leaving," one muttered, starting to back away, but the officers blocked their path, snapping handcuffs onto their wrists before they could run. "You're not going anywhere, impersonating officers carries years in prison," one of the real cops said firmly. Karen's eyes widened as she realized her backup was gone. She was alone. I stepped down from the porch slowly, keeping my voice calm but cutting. "Karen, you've harassed my family, put fake notices on my door, and now you tried to have me arrested on my own land with criminals pretending to be cops." I paused, letting the weight of it settle. "Do you understand how deep you've gone?" Her lips trembled. For a moment it looked like she might break down, but then she snapped, screaming, "I did this for the neighborhood. People like you ruin everything. You don't deserve this house, this land, this community." The officer turned to her, stern and steady. "Ma'am, you're under investigation for filing false reports, harassment, and conspiracy with impersonators. You need to come with us." Karen's head whipped side to side, searching the crowd for support. But all she saw were cameras pointed at her, neighbors shaking their heads, and whispers of "she's finally getting what she deserves." Her voice dropped to a whisper, broken and desperate. "You can't do this, you caw." But when the cuffs clicked around her wrists, the entire street erupted in cheers. And I just stood there silent, letting the justice play out, knowing this was only the beginning of her downfall. As Karen sat cuffed on the curb, her face red with rage and humiliation, one of the officers searched her bag. He pulled out a thick folder stuffed with papers. The crowd leaned in, whispering. He flipped through them and whistled low. Well, looks like we've got more than harassment here." Karen jerked up. "That's private property, you can't look at that." But it was too late. The officer held the folder high for everyone to see, dozens of forged HOA notices, fake eviction letters, even mock-up blueprints with her name scribbled on the corner. At the bottom was a list of properties including mine marked with dollar signs. The neighbors gasped, one woman shouted she was trying to steal our homes, another man cursed under his breath, shaking his head. I stepped forward, my voice steady but sharp. So that was your plan, Karen, push people out with fake authority then scoop up their land cheap. Her face twisted. I was saving this neighborhood, you don't understand, the HOA put me in charge. The officer cut her off. Ma'am, these documents are evidence of fraud and conspiracy. Nobody put you in charge, you put yourself there. The fake cops, already in the back of a squad car, yelled out, she paid us. She said the HOA would cover us if we helped her. The crowd exploded in shock, phones caught every second. Karen's head dropped, her voice breaking. No, they weren't supposed to say that. I crouched down just enough so she could hear me clearly. You didn't just pick a fight with a neighbor, you picked a fight with a federal officer, and you picked the wrong land to mess with. She looked up at me, eyes burning with hate but filled with fear. This isn't over, I'll fight you until the end. I leaned closer, calm and unshaken. Karen, it already is over. The officers lifted her up, leading her to the cruiser. The crowd clapped, some even cheering. For the first time in months, the street felt like it was mine again. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about one crazy neighbor. Her plan was bigger, and I had a feeling more secrets were about to come out. Karen was shoved into the back of the squad car, but instead of staying quiet, she pressed her face against the glass and screamed, "You don't know who I work for, they won't let this stand." Her words carried down the street, making the neighbors glance at each other nervously. The officer driving shook his head. Every crook says the same thing, he slammed the door shut. But something about the way she said it, it didn't feel like empty words. Minutes later, as the cruisers pulled away with Karen and her hired fakes, one of the remaining officers turned to me. "Marshal, you might want to see this." He held up his phone, dispatch had sent over an alert. My jaw tightened as I read it. Karen wasn't just some random HOA bully. She was connected to a shady community management group that had been flagged for property scams across 3 states. They targeted homeowners, forged eviction notices, and flipped stolen properties for millions. The officer looked at me seriously. She's not working alone, there's a whole network behind her. The crowd murmured in shock. One of my neighbors whispered, this was bigger than all of us. I stayed calm, but inside the fire was already burning. I'd thought Karen was just a nuisance. But this was organized crime hiding behind the mask of an HOA. I pulled out my badge, holding it firm. Then this isn't the end, this is federal now. The neighbors erupted in cheers again, some even saluting as if I'd just won a battle. But I didn't smile. Not yet, because if Karen was just a pawn, I was about to go after the people pulling the strings. And I swore on my land, on my family, on everything I stood for. They were going to regret ever knocking on my door. A week later, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, safer, almost like everyone could breathe again. The fake eviction notices were gone, the fear was gone, and so was Karen. She sat in county jail, awaiting trial with charges stacked so high even her expensive lawyers couldn't climb out. But for me, it wasn't just about her. It was about what she stood for, people who think power means stealing from others, who think rules don't apply to them. I stood on my porch, watching my little boy ride his bike down the street, the neighbors waving and smiling like nothing had ever happened. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just my land, this was my family's safety. My responsibility. One of the neighbors walked over, clapping me on the back. "Marshal, we owe you big time, you didn't just protect your home, you protected all of us." I nodded, my eyes still on my son. That's what we do, we protect what's ours. The truth was simple. I hadn't fought for this country overseas, hadn't carried a badge all these years just to be told I couldn't live freely on my own land. Karen thought she could scare me, control me, even take from me, but she forgot one thing. I don't break easy. And I don't back down. As the sun set behind the houses, I felt that surge of pride only Americans know deep in their bones, that no matter how strong the enemy, no matter how unfair the fight, we stand tall. Because this land was mine. And no one, not even a fake HOA, was ever going to take it from me again.